Hello, John Dorsick here with the Ohio Department of Transportation in the Office of CAD Mapping Services. And this video is going to go over a VBA called the Geo Reference Tool. And this tool, it's mainly used in conjunction with OSIP data. So that'd be the OSIP imagery and the OSIP point cloud data. So unless you have that data downloaded, this VBA won't be too much use for you. So internally, for to ODOT, we have the data downloaded for internal use, and that is why many of you may have seen in the last update that this was released internally because we didn't have a video made yet, and us releasing it would have just caused you guys to ask us a million questions about it. So if you guys felt like we were keeping something from you, we really weren't. We just ran out of time. So hopefully this video clears up some of the confusion with this VBA. But again, it's not going to give you much use unless you have the data. So first thing, to open it under the ODOT tab is GIS and mapping. Then there's the GeoReference Tool. Now, if you do not see this here, that means that you most likely don't have the data downloaded for your office, and this is not going to be available because there's no point in showing it if you can't really use it. So if you want to set this up, what you need to do to get this to show up is in the local folder. So wherever you have your CAD standards, again, when you get your CAD standards, you have, let me get out of this, let me go to, so inside the .CAD folder, you should see a standards in a local folder. Now, you most likely want to see the OSIP. This is where we put the OSIP data. So all the LiDAR files and imagery files that this VBA is going to use. But inside the local folder, you need to create a CFG file named Geo Reference Tool. That exact name. Can't be anything different. When you open GeoPack or MicroStation with our O.CAD standards, in our configuration, it is looking for this config file, GeoReference Tool. So if it's there, then you will see in the ODOT pull down, you'll see that GeoReference Tool button show up. If this is not there, then it won't show up. So what are we setting inside here? I'll come back to it, but we are setting 4 variables which the VBA is using, and it's basically telling the location of where the data is. So I'll show you when we get into the VBA where it's getting that stuff. So let's open the VBA now. So again, ODOT, GIS and mapping, GeoReference Tool. First thing you're going to get is a disclaimer saying that the data from OSIP, we don't guarantee the accuracy of this data, and blah blah blah. You guys can read all that. And basically, this OSIP data can't be used for design level stuff because it's old data. It's not survey grade accuracy. It's just you might find it useful for some preliminary stuff or something. I'm not telling you what you can and can't use it for. I'm just telling you we don't make a guarantee on the accuracy. So you guys can read that. And then if you're not in a 3D model, you'll get this. You have to be in a 3D model to attach point cloud data. So it's just telling you, hey, you're in a 2D model, so you won't be able to attach point cloud data. So hit OK, and we'll get into the VBA. Okay. So first thing everyone knows, this question mark opens up the documentation for it, which I'll update because now that the video is here, you don't need to say video coming soon. So going through this, there is a disclaimer button, opens up the same disclaimer if you want to read this again. There's a little link to OGRIP's website where you can get the data. So okay. So first, the gear button opens up basically the settings for this VBA, and you'll notice that there's an imagery primary and secondary directory and a point cloud primary and secondary directory, which, if you recall from earlier, these are the 4 variables that I said I'd come back to. So you have o.imagery prim for primary directory and o.pc for point cloud, prim for primary directory, and the same thing for imagery, and point clouds for the secondary directory. So why are they primary and secondary? It's really geared for organization where they have multiple offices. Like ODOT, we have 12 districts. So sometimes going over the network can be pretty slow. So a district or an office setting has the ability to set the primary directory to maybe a network drive that's local to their location that only contains, say, the imagery or point cloud data for just their area. And then the secondary location would be the location where the whole state OSIP data is. So that's what we have set up, which you guys may find a need for, may not. So basically, when attaching the data, it's going to look at the primary directory first. If it can't find it, then look for the secondary location directory. These little buttons right here, you can set them as well. So in the order of, I guess, priority, this CFG file in the local folder would be the first thing that it reads and sets these values. Okay, if the user comes in and hits one of these buttons and selects a different folder and hits OK, it only changes it for the active session of MicroStation or PowerGeoPack. Once they close and reopen, it will be back to whatever was in the CFG file. Okay, that's if they hit OK and they change it. If they hit set dir defaults, means set directory defaults button, and a little pop-up will tell you. Basically, it will then set these values to their user preference file. So then it will be stored in their user preference file, and so every time they load this, it will be the values that they chose. So then it no longer would be using what was set in the CFG file. Okay. Clear dialog defaults will basically reset back to the CFG file. So if the user did change some stuff here and set the directory defaults and they didn't like that, they can clear what they did, and basically it takes it out of the user preference, which would then go back to the CFG file. Okay. Cancel, obviously cancel, so if you hit cancel, then nothing takes effect. So if you did change it and hit cancel, it does not stay. So then these last 2 buttons, I'm going to come back to their settings for their preference settings for this VBA. So I'll come back to those once we get a little further. So the way this VBA works is, if you guys are unaware of OSIP data, it is tiled, and we do have just the tiles in DGN format in our standards. So if I go to, let me close this down. So inside of our standards, under the data folder, you'll see there's a OSIP tile for north zone feet and south zone feet, DGN. So the north zone contains all the tiles in the north zone, and the south zone contains all the tiles in the south zone. So this VBA knows, since you're running ODAT standards, it knows these 2 files should be there. So that's what this first section is to help you attach those tiles. So if I just want to attach the north zone, I check on the north zone. If I just want to check on the south zone, I check on the south zone. If I want to attach both, I check them both on. And then I can just hit attach tiles. So it's going to attach these. And so I just created a blank file, so it's probably over in way off my screen, so I'm going to fit my view. And there are the tiles. Okay, so what did this do? All it really did was add 2 references to those dgen files I just pointed out. So it just kind of streamlined that process for you. It also sets the orientation to geographic reprojected. Now, in order for that orientation to work, this model has to have a coordinate system. So hopefully this has a coordinate system if you're using the AutoCAD standards, because that's kind of the direction we're going. So if it doesn't have a coordinate system assigned, then the geographic reprojected orientation can't be set, and these most likely won't be in the right location. You'll most likely see them both on top of each other because it couldn't reproject because it doesn't know what coordinate system you're in. So you want to make sure you have a coordinate system set. So these tiles, I forget how many, there's like 40-some thousand tiles or something like that. So if we zoom in on a tile, you'll see there's a shape and then a text. Okay, so we're going to use these tiles to basically help us attach our data. So instead of trying to skim through, so wherever you would have your OSIP data, so if I go into Imagery, here's all the TIFF files for each of those tiles, just numbered to match the tile, the text that was inside the tile. So if you wanted to attach imagery for a given tile, and the same goes for the point cloud data, same naming convention, same goes there. You'd have to really spend some time finding the location, writing down the numbers, finding the numbers, going to raster references, and attaching all those TIFFs individually. It could take some time. So the main point of this is to speed that process up. So I guess before moving on, if you wanted to detach your tiles, whatever's checked on is what will get detached. So you have both of them on, you hit detach, it will detach. You could do that, or you could just go to your references and detach them that way. Same thing. Okay. Doesn't make a difference on which way it does the same exact thing. Okay. So now moving on to the next section, imagery and point cloud. So right now you only see a checkbox for imagery files. That's because we're not in a 3D model, right? I can't attach a point cloud if I'm not in a 3D model. So I already created a 3D model in here. I'm gonna switch over to that model. I'm going to attach the tiles in this model now. I'll hit my view when I'm done. There we go. Okay. So now you will see, because I'm in a 3D model, it automatically gave me this point cloud files checkbox now. So now I can basically zoom to a section I want to attach. I could use this button. All this does is switch you to the element selection tool. So it doesn't do anything more than that. So if you're already on the element selection tool, this button doesn't mean much. But what we're doing here is we're going to select the tiles that we'd want to attach data for. Right? So if I wanted to attach these 2 tiles, I could select those. I could just create a selection like that. Now what we're after here is the actual text. Selecting the boxes isn't going to do anything. And you can select more. You can select more than just the text. It's going to know to only use these texts to figure out what to attach. So it's okay if the other thing is in your selection set. Okay. So say I wanted to attach these 4 tiles, and I wanted to attach the imagery. I could just check on imagery and hit attach. But if I wanted to check on imagery and point cloud, I'd get the imagery and the point cloud data for all the tiles I selected. Now, be careful on how many tiles you select. The point cloud data is very large, so selecting, like 50 tiles is most likely going to crash MicroStation because it can't handle that amount of data. So be careful on that. that you're limited by the software here. But you can actually choose what level you want your imageries to go on and your point cloud data to go on. So I'll just leave them on raster 1 and point cloud 1, and I'll hit attach. So again, I have to have this stuff selected, these text values selected, so this can figure out what it should attach. And again, it's going to be searching the primary directory first. If it can't find the image or point cloud in the primary directory, it will then search the secondary directory. So obviously mine are the same, but if you were in a different office in a different area in Ohio, it could be useful to have just your section so you can speed that up. But if for some reason you need data outside your area, it's still there, it just might take a little longer. So I'll hit attach files, and it's going to go through and attach. I think it, there, let's click it. Oh, and another thing I should mention here is if you want to actually see what's going on, if you check this show results dialog, you'll get a results. Oh, I guess I should hit the right button. So they're already attached. So if your tiles are already attached, it's going to tell you they're already attached right there. So that's what that checkbox does. It'll keep popping up every time, or you could just leave it up and then it will just keep filling out. So let me hit the right button. So go through and attach. So this might take a little bit of time, especially depending on where the raw data is. And I'm on a PC over Wi-Fi as well, so when it's done, you'll get a little message, and if you had this dialog checked on, you'll see, what happened. So we attached this pod file on this level, this TIFF on this level, and so forth, which is exactly what I wanted. So look what we got. So what did this do behind the scenes? Well, if we go to Raster Manager, we'll see there's 4 images. So you could always come here and attach your rasters this way manually versus using the VBA, but that would take obviously a lot longer. What about the point cloud data? So the point cloud data is in this point cloud right next to the raster manager, and you'll see there's 4 point clouds, and the point clouds are in pod format. And ODA, our data that we have, obviously we converted the OSIP data that was in LAS format to pods, and we removed everything but ground from these pod files. So these pod files only have ground in them, so we don't have to worry about the classification. So if you're external and you download this data and convert them to pods, you still have all the classifications in there. So you want to be careful in what you're using if you're going to use this data to create a terrain or whatnot. I'm thinking about making another video to kind of go over those tools, or this video could get pretty long. So this is just going to go over the VBA, but just noting. So I'm going to turn off these point clouds, and you can see there's the imagery that got attached. So detaching works the same way as attaching. You have to have the tile selected, right? So if that text is selected and I hit detach, whatever's checked on, it will detach. So I only have that one selected. Let me actually do that one, and I will detach. And we look at what we got. There's what was detached, MLO output. So again, I had to select the tile and have the things checked on that I wanted to detach. Alright, I think everyone gets the idea. It's a pretty easy VBA. It was just to help streamline this process because it was taking a while. So a little more with this VBA. This is the OSIP tab. There is another tab for maps, and the main thing you can do here is you can actually open your location in Google Maps where you data point. All this button does is launch the Google Maps tool that's inside Workstation. So you can select your style and your view here. Select map, streets. So you can go straight to street view if you wanted. So all this does is launch the tool. So it's not really much more than that. And if I just data point, it's going to open up Google Maps at that location. It's pretty cool. So now another thing, this Bing Map section, if you don't see that, it's because your configuration probably doesn't have a Bing Maps key. For ODOT we have a Bing Maps key, so we can actually attach Bing Maps. So there's 3 different layer options for Bing Maps. So again, if you don't see it, it's because you don't have a Bing Maps key. So if you do, you will see this. If you don't, then you won't see this section. Okay, so you could choose what layer you want, road, aerial, or aerial with roads or with labels, and then you could choose what level you want this to go to. So if I hit attach, this adds Bing Maps, and then we look at the output, tells us what's going on. So what did this do behind the scenes? If we look at our raster references, we'll now say Bing Maps. So really, again, this VBA, you can do everything manually. This is just streamlining some of the processes for you. Again, so you can always attach Bing Maps manually through here, attach Bing Maps. So if you wanted to detach, you could just detach them that way, or you could have came here and detach it from the raster manager. Okay, pretty simple VBA. The last thing that I want to go over is back to this gear. So I said I'd come back to it. These 2 buttons, set dialog defaults and clear dialog defaults. So basically, if you are going to use this a lot and like you want these to be checked on by default, maybe this you want always to default to raster 2, or this one to raster 3, and this one to raster 1, to aerial. You basically set this dialog for all the options you want, and then come here and hit this set dialog defaults. And that basically writes everything you have checked on or off and which levels you have in the pull down to your user preference file. So every time you come into this VBA, it will default. So I tried clicking on this, but I still had this open, so it gave me a little warning. So that was what that sound was. So that could be useful if you want to set up a starting point or a preference of how you want this VBA to look. That's what this set dialog defaults will do. This adds it to user preference. If you want to revert that, say clear everything you added to your user preferences for this dialog settings, you just hit the clear dialog defaults. So that's what those 2 buttons will do. And that's all there is to the VBA. If you guys have any questions about it, feel free to contact us. All of our help documents have the link at the bottom to our support form right here. Again, the main thing with this VBA is you need the data for it to work. So until next time.